Hello, my over 100 subscribers and those who I haven't won over yet, and welcome to HD Philosophy, the channel where we take some time with the classics to awaken the hidden dragon within all of you. And today is episode 1 of Wisdom-Filled Wednesdays, a time where I get to combine my love of philosophy and cinema in order to dig into these great movies and find within the central conflict the wisdom that they covet. And today, we're deep diving one of my favorite movies of all time, The Departed. So the central conflict of this movie starts right in the beginning, where Frank Costello, might as well be the devil himself, asks an important question.
When I was your age, they would say we could become cops or criminals. Today, what I'm saying is this. When you're facing a loaded gun, what's the difference?
And basically, he's asking something that Plato was tackling through the 10 books of the Republic. Is there a reason to be just? Is justice merely a tool meant to keep people down, or is there an actual reason people ought to act justly? The Republic starts off with Thrasymachus, who is a sophist, talking to Socrates. And Thrasymachus is a person who believes that there really is no knowledge, because in Socrates' time, there was this fight between people who actually believed that there was no truth, and then people like Socrates. But there is one person in the Republic that Socrates actually believes can be saved. He actually looks at him as a student, and this person's name is Glaucon. And for Glaucon, he has a very pessimistic attitude on why be moral. In fact, he believes the life of the unjust person, they say, is much better than the just one. Think about what that means right there. If I just act unjustly and I get away with it, that will produce a way better life than a person just acting morally. Think about what is being attacked here. That if a person can actually get away with anything, they might as well do it. And in order to demonstrate that the unjust life is so much better than the just life, Glaucon proposes 2 separate individuals that pretty much highlights this film. First, therefore, we must suppose that an unjust person will act as clever craftsmen do. A first-rate captain or doctor, for example, knows the difference between what his craft can and cannot do. He attempts the first, but lets the second go by, and if he happens to slip, he can put things right. In the same way, an unjust person's successfully attempts at injustice must remain undetected. If he is to be fully unjust, anyone who is caught should be thought inept, for the extreme of injustice is to be believed to be just without being just. Basically, the unjust person is one who is evil, but nobody around him knows it. And more importantly, everyone around him loves him. So this is like the unjust life to the most extreme. Then Glaucon posits a second individual, a morally just person who is being just for the sake of justice itself. Having hypothesized such a person, let's now, in our argument, put beside him a just man, who is simple and noble, who doesn't want to be believed to be good, but to be so. We must take away his reputation, for a reputation for justice would bring him honor and rewards, so that it wouldn't be clear whether he is just for the sake of justice itself or for the sake of those honors and rewards. We must strip him of everything except justice and make his situation the opposite of the unjust person's. So basically, this individual is good and moral, but nobody around him likes him or believes he is just. So he gets no reward for being just. And then Glaucon asks, which would you rather be? This is the question of The Departed. When you're faced with a loaded gun, what's the difference? And it asks something very human, and the entire movie is a meditation on this question. And the answer is very hard to determine, because I can imagine a lot of us would not want to be the just individual, but would rather live the life of the unjust person that Glaucon has outlined. So let's dig into the question, why be moral? And the one who portrays the unjust individual in this movie is Detective Colin Sullivan. As a child, he was brought into the life of crime by the wings of the dragon, the demon himself, Frank Costello. And he is our immoral man from the Republic. An unjust man that no one knows is immoral and everyone seems to like, who lives kind of a lavish life because of his injustice. And then on the other side, we have William Costigan Jr., a reformed gangster, actually born into the life of the Irish gangs of the time, trying to be a just man when he loses his mother. He is our moral man from the Republic. He wants to be a good individual, but right from the beginning, the question is, do you want to pretend to be a cop or do you want to be a cop? A fundamental question of, do you want to be a good man or do you want to pretend to be a good man? And this has William Costigan decide to go undercover, a just individual living a life where everybody believes he is unjust and immoral. Here we have Glaucon's two separate individuals, where the entire movie becomes a meditation on answering that question. Is there a reason to be good? The answer to this question isn't easy. The entire movie is a back and forth of this graying out of morality. I mean, you have a gangster who is an FBI informant. The FBI is supposed to represent good individuals, and yet this informant, who is the devil himself, Frank Costello, is like feeding them bad guys. But he himself is just doing whatever he wants, slaughtering whoever he wants, and he's absolutely protected by this higher order individuals who are supposed to represent the law. So you have this gray area of, well, I mean, if the gangster can get away with everything, what does it matter? And not only can he get away with everything, but the good guys seem to be on his side to allow him to get away with everything. That is how grayed out the morality is. And you really got to give it to Martin Scorsese. He makes a strong argument for what's the point, right? That Frank Costello question, right? Why be good? And things get even more complicated as we move through the movie, because it seems like Detective Sullivan is living a great life. Women love him, men want to be him and look up to him, and he's just moving through the ranks. But William Costigan, who is a good individual, is living behind bars right now. Women don't even want to look at him. But in here is where we start to see the delineation. It all begins, really, with the therapist, Dr. Madeline Madden. At first, Madeline is taken by Detective Sullivan, as everyone seems to upon first glance. But see, herein lies the Aristotelian warning. Your merits can get you through the door, but it's your character that's going to pull you through the rest of your life. Because the actions that you perform have an impact on your character. Character coming from the Greek kerosene, which means to etch. Your character is etched on your heart through the actions that you perform. And here is where we start to see the break in this question on why be moral. Because throughout, what we end up seeing is Dr. Madeline Madden falling for William Costigan over Detective Sullivan. And we have to ask, well, why does this happen? We start to see this when Detective Sullivan invites Madeline to his house, right? Here is an area reaped of deceit. And it begs the question, can an immoral person live a good life? When Dr. Madeline comes in, Sullivan sees all of her stuff and he sees her picture of when she was young, and he's like, oh, we gotta hide this right here, because we imagine the company we would have over. Right here is a crack in the vase, because even at home where something's supposed to be safe, it isn't safe, because he lives a life of deceit, and a life of deceit has no safe place. Now contrast that with William Costigan and his discussions with the therapist, Dr. Madeline. He is absolutely honest, brutally honest, in their first meeting, where he tells her, you want the truth? I want pills. And of course she closes her file and there's a big argument there. She ends up refusing to be his therapist from there on in, but there was something about his raw truth in that moment that seems to have won her over, and they develop a relationship from there on in, where he would come to see her and he would just spell out truth and what's going on in his life, as opposed to the detective who lives a life of deceit and yet wants to have a relationship. There's so much going on with this first scene where Madeline moves in. In addition to just the photo, we see Frank Costello actually call Sullivan and on the phone gives him a good tongue lashing. And she can see immediately that there's something wrong here. There's something wrong in this individual's life. Then you have William Costigan, who meets her at her house and sees that same photo. And this is just absolutely brilliant from Martin Scorsese. He looks at it, he smiles, and he elevates it. He puts it even higher and hangs it. And she loves that right there. Because that is how somebody who is truthful and trustworthy would react in that moment. Outside of the psychiatrist, Dr. Madeline, I think there's a lot of other hints in this movie as to the question that Costello asks in the beginning. And one of them just so happens to be my favorite scene in the entire movie. So Delahunt actually calls Costigan when they think they've found the rat, and he gives them the wrong address. Now this leads to a shootout where Delahunt gets hit, and then back at the hideout, Delahunt is dying. And it kind of reminds me of that saying of why there are no atheists in the foxhole. Delahunt's dying. This is it. This is going to be the last thing he sees. This is going to be the last thing that he does with his life, his entire existence, which is basically an immoral individual in a gang responsible for countless crimes against humanity. And yet, he pulls over Costigan and he says,
"You know what I thought today?
What's that?
Who didn't show up today is a rat."
Yeah? So?
You've never been late in your life. And when I called you, I made a mistake. I gave you the wrong address, but you showed up at the right one, didn't you?
Tell me why I didn't tell nobody. Huh? Tell me why.
Tell me why. Why didn't I tell on you? What is this? What's going on? Like, why is he having this crisis of conscience? And I think this is one of the answers right here. You know, often in life when we get away with things, the guilt kind of like just rips into us. It's almost like we need the punishment. We need the punishment to kind of wash the blood off of our hands. This is, by the way, what Nietzsche was talking about when he said God is dead. There was this lamenting, like, who would wash away the sins now? Now, he did have an optimism that we would be able to make our own morals. So I'm not saying that Nietzsche was in any way advocating for a religious kind of morality. But Delahunt in this scene is just, he's asking why, and he can't figure it out. Like, he should tell on Costigan, but he just can't do it. And he's looking at Costigan. The person he knows is not only a rat, but clearly a cop, maybe a just individual. And he's asking, why can't I tell on you? Why can't I do it? And then here's the answer. It's like, you might be able to escape doing some bad things to bad people sometimes, but eventually the bill gets paid. You can only kick that can down the road for so long. And all of this comes to a culmination when Costigan finally takes down Sullivan. And he harkens back to a friend he had in the academy. He says, "You know me, you know I'm not a liar. This is the rat right here." And the guy doesn't pull the trigger. It's like, there's something about Costigan's character. Yes, he's a rat, but he's also a good man. Because he's doing this for good reasons, there's almost like this aura around him. It makes it so that people around him actually like him. I honestly think this is why Frank Costello doesn't pull the trigger on William Costigan. When he's having a conversation with Sullivan about Costigan, about Bill possibly being the rat, Sullivan tells him, you know, that would have come down to me. And then Frank is the one who makes a leap of faith. It's not him. It's not Bill. No way, he says. That's not exactly what Sullivan said, but it gives you a hint. Because Costigan is a good individual, these people naturally gravitate towards him, naturally give him the benefit of the doubt. They don't want to take him out. Isn't that fascinating right there? There's something about immorality that stains your character. There's something about immorality where everyone else around you doesn't want to be near you. It's like you have this stink of injustice about you. But people who are moral and people who are just, they kind of have this aura of gravity to them. Confucianism would often state this, that the sage wouldn't have to announce their arrival. Their being, their character is like a pull of gravity where people just want to be around them. And that's just another inkling that tells you what the difference is when you meet a loaded gun. Whether you've been a moral individual or an unjust individual, there is something to morality. There is a way it affects your soul. There is a way it affects your being. And more importantly, you cannot sit there and live an immoral life of full immoral deeds and not expect it to affect you, your person, and everyone around you. So what we're starting to see is the answers to this fundamental question on why act moral. So what's the difference? How do you earn somebody's trust? Well, not lying to them all the time. The truth. Truth is the foundation of trust. Somebody needs to believe you. If you're going to have a conversation with somebody, there needs to be this inherent, I believe what you're saying, in order for trust to build as the foundation. And I think the scene that highlights this most is the crescendo, the culmination that leads up to when Costigan finally arrests Sullivan. Because what we have in this scene is Costigan arrests Sullivan, and what is Sullivan throwing at him? Nobody's gonna believe you. I erased you. This is gonna be funny. And all he's doing is throwing out all the lies that he's built up. He's relying on, unfortunately, the lies of you aren't an undercover cop. I'm the real person. I'll make you out to be the rat. So he's just throwing lies at him over and over again. But I love this. When they're in the elevator and he said his last phrase, like, yeah, this is it. Nobody's gonna believe you. And then there's that lonely silence as the elevator ticks down as they get to the bottom floor. And he realizes, I'm screwed. Because there's one thing, ladies and gentlemen, that you cannot avoid. There's one thing that is unshakable, and it is the foundation of trust itself. Truth. What's the truth? Sullivan is the rat, and Costigan is the hero. Costigan is the one that has been there the entire time. Costigan is the one that has all the tapes and can prove it. Costigan's ally is truth itself. And no matter how much you argue, no matter how much you try to plead your case, the fact of the matter is, truth always wins out. So then Sullivan says, just kill me. That's it. That is his realization that everything is over. That is his realization that all the lies up till now are going to be paid, that there is always a price that will be paid at the end of the day. When you lie, you are kicking that can down the road. Eventually, it will be paid. And that's the greatest lie of all. The idea that your lies will not eventually see the light. It is a perpetual lie people tell each other all the time. No, I'll get away with it. But this is something that Plato says, you will never get away with it. Even if the outside world doesn't see it, it affects your character. Your life becomes a lie. You start to live in this deceit right here. And here, when he says, just kill me, this is the culmination of all the lies and all the deceit throughout the entire movie falling down on Sullivan. And of course, Costigan says, I am killing you. I am killing you. I am killing the lie. I am destroying the deceit. I am bringing to light the lies. You are the rat. You are the deceiver. You are the individual I'm going to bring forth to let everyone know, because truth is my ally. And then, of course, Costigan gets shot. There we see the honors that are bestowed upon Costigan. We see that nobody respects or believes Sullivan anymore. This is kind of hinted at where Dr. Madeline kind of just walks away from him and doesn't even blink, although she is weeping at Costigan's death, right? And then we also see, it's very subtle, but when he gets off of the elevator, there's a woman with a dog and she kind of pulls the dog away. See, this is what happens, everyone. This is the answer to the riddle here. We often think that our decisions don't have impact on us, on our being. And it is the answer that Plato offers, by the way. We don't think that our actions have an impact on our being, but they do. We are not individuals who can just act immorally and it not have any repercussions whatsoever. Every single action is embedded in our character. Every single action permeates within not only ourselves, but outside to our environment. The fact of the matter is, no one trusts Sullivan. And trust is such a fundamental requirement for all forms of societal interactions. What is a conversation without trust? Can it even be had? What is friendship without trust? What is a marriage without trust, right? When you act unjustly throughout your entire life, you may be able to fool some people sometimes, but you'll never be able to fool everyone all the time. And this is what Plato says at the end of the Republic. Imagine an individual who gets whatever they want all the time. What would their life be like? And Glaucon tells him it would be hardly free, because the idea here is when you get whatever you want, you become a slave to that desire. If you're an unjust person living an unjust life for your entire life, you become a slave to that lifestyle. And what the unjust person cannot do is trust anyone. Think about the sword of Damocles. The sword of Damocles comes from an ancient myth of King Dionysus, who has Damocles visit him one day. And Damocles looks at his lavish lifestyle and says, wow, you must be the most free individual, the happiest individual I have ever met. And King Dionysus invites him over for dinner just to demonstrate how free his lavish lifestyle is. And so Damocles joins King Dionysus for dinner. When he sits down, looks above his head, and sees a sword hanging by a thread. And he says, well, what's that right there? And King Dionysus tells him, that right there is how I live my entire life, wondering whose sword will eventually take me out. I have a lot of stuff, and because of it, everyone else wants that stuff, and I am in a constant fear for my life. You see? Without trust, how can you have the small little joys in life? William Costigan, if you look back through the movie, there are small little instances where there is brethren, friendship, where there is love, because that's what happens when you live a life of trust. You end up getting to enjoy small little pleasures that we have throughout life. We look at the politicians who we know have unearned pleasures, but we look at them and say, man, I would act immoral for that right there. But what we don't see is what's happening behind closed doors. Ask yourself, what does their family look like? Are their children happy? From there, we'll get a glimpse on what is really going on behind the curtain. Because like Damocles to King Dionysus, we might believe that they're living these lavish lifestyles, but we don't see the sword that's perched above their head or the knives at their neck. And so that's the answer to Costello's question. And that's the difference when you face a loaded gun.